Hello, beautiful people. All right. Just going to check and make sure we're live here. Let's see how we're doing here. All right, awesome. We're live. Hello. Welcome to Tea Talks. And I'm Megan Johnson, and I am a life coach. So I realized that I never really introduced myself on these Tea Talks, but I'm Megan Johnson. I'm a life coach, a confidence coach, and reclamation coach. So I'm really excited to be here with you today. I have my coffee here. I feel like that's becoming a normal thing for the 12 o'clock. I have my coffee at my 12 o'clock tea talk, and then I have some type of tea for the 3 o'clock one. I did bring as a little like show and tell before we dive into things. I don't know if you are familiar with Four Sigmatic. They do like mushroom coffees and mushroom teas and different things. My husband and I love this one where it's a mushroom cacao mix where it has reishi in it to help just kind of like keep things calm, and they come in these nice little packets. You just make your hot chocolate. So I thought I'd share. If you're here and joining the live session, I would love if you can just drop some comments. Let me know what you have in front of you. If you have any coffee or tea. And yeah, be a blast to just have you join the conversation. So I will go ahead and get started while we're waiting for people to show up. So today I kind of titled this little talk, we're in a marathon, not a sprint. So purity has been our theme for this week, has been endurance as a grace. And as I was just kind of leaning into what I wanted to chat through with this and what endurance really means to me when I think about it, it just came to mind like that we're in this for the long haul, right? Like life, not meaning COVID-19, like that's going to end at some point. But life is a marathon, and this is just one piece of the overall big picture. And awesome. So yes, Alex, the hot cacao is the best. I love that. Alex is my husband. He's on watching right now. And Jessica, coffee for sure. Yes. I know, Jessica, you're in PST time zone, I believe. So that's 10 o'clock your time right now. So coffee is definitely a 10 a.m. thing, for sure. Awesome. So over the past couple weeks with the Tea Talks, I've been spending a lot of time. Oh, and Angie, coffee, of course. Awesome. It's good to have you here, Ange. So we've been spending a lot of time grounding in, reclaiming our power, allowing ourselves space to trust ourselves. So 2 weeks ago, the theme was be here and now. And last week was beginning to trust. And now it's endurance as a grace. And so marathon, not a sprint. So why endurance? Why endurance is a grace? So for me, as I've been thinking through this, it's because during traumatic times like this, our bodies are processing a lot. And it can be incredibly easy and normal for us to jump into fight or flight or freeze during these times. And in order to endure through this marathon of life, we have to switch back to rest and digest. So before I kind of dive into that concept more, I wanted to read a bit more about why this is a traumatic event, and what qualifies it as a traumatic event. So I'm going to read a quote here. So a post I recently read stated it as this. So a traumatic event is marked by two things. One, you can't escape it / have a loss of control over what happens. And two, you can't make sense of it. Continuing the quote. So currently I've been hearing from so many people how tired they feel lately. COVID-19 is a traumatic event. It fits both criteria. For some of us who have been through trauma of this nature, we know how to handle it, but it's still new to many people. Whether you're conscious of it, you're experiencing trauma. That's why you're feeling tired and unmotivated. This is why you're feeling yourself hoarding money or resources. It's a trauma response. Resisting doing your work is a form of trying to exert some kind of control over an uncontrollable situation. Hoarding is also a form of trying to get back some control. And then I would just kind of add to that. So that's kind of the end quote. So I would add to that, this is why many of us are immediately overcommitting to our work or pushing ourselves to find solutions and provide solutions with immediacy. So everyone responds to trauma differently. And sometimes it's our old trauma responses coming up, and sometimes it's kind of like a new experience to experience this type of trauma. And so we're noticing people kind of doing all these different things, and they're all kind of a collective response. And so because we are trying to regain control, we're switching into our fight or flight, like we're going, or we're freezing. And we're utilizing our old coping mechanisms that were created to protect us in short bursts of immediate danger. And that's where the endurance comes in. So our trauma responses of fight or flight, and freeze, that's like when a tiger chases a gazelle, and the gazelle has that like immediate ability to respond, but it's created for bursts. It's not created for a long period of time. And so especially as our social distancing has become a little bit longer, it's so important to remember that, again, we're in a marathon and not a sprint. And we get to hold grace for this full experience. Hold grace for our trauma responses. Hold grace for whatever it is that we're feeling, because that actually gives us permission to endure with greater strength. So I'm just going to take a look at some of the comments real quick before I keep diving in. I think it's mostly just drink what people are drinking, which is amazing. So lots of coffee, which is amazing. And then Rich has probably a naked juice, I think that is. Love that. I love that brand. Super delicious. I've been drinking like a few more smoothies recently, and it's been really, really good. Trying to still have my salads because it's a both and. I've also been having pizza. I don't know about anybody else, but holding space for both. So I love that so much. Let me know if this message is resonating as well, or if there are questions that come up or thoughts, and what endurance means for you during this time. What does endurance as a grace, when you hear that, what does that mean for you? Because I know I created this conversation out of what I felt when I heard those words. But again, especially in a time like this, it's so beautiful to recognize we all experience things differently. All of our experiences are valid, but we all do experience it differently. That's where we get to the opportunity to learn from one another. So, so diving kind of back into the conversation, we're in a marathon, we're not in a sprint, and this is just one season of our history. And if we continue to operate from fight or flight or from freeze, it's not sustainable, and we will burn out. Or with freeze is a very interesting one. I don't know how familiar you are with the nervous system. I'm honestly still relatively new to this, so I provided some resources as well. But with freeze, again, like our body's not meant to stay in that state of freeze. And I wish, I know Jessica was here, or maybe is still watching, and she has a beautiful story. I actually have a podcast episode with her, and she has a beautiful story about kind of her journey with brain surgery and how her body needed to kind of be put back together with trauma being stored in, I'm trying to remember the words. You should just go back and if you find my podcast on iTunes, the Reclamation Podcast, it's incredible. Like, her story is incredible. So there's a question here. Do you think we're getting used to the COVID-19 shock, kind of like what exposure therapy does? That's interesting. Oh, and Jessica posted too, as a marathoner, I really resonate with this picture in relation to COVID. The thought of bringing grace into that is intriguing. What might grace look like, maybe on a daily basis? In a racing metaphor, I think of caring for my body in 1 mile at a time, knowing it's a long haul, pacing. Yes, 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 exactly. And fascia, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you, Jessica. So with the conversation I was just talking about, her body had to process the trauma. So it was her fascia needed to come back together. I think that's what it was. So again, I'm just going to redirect you to the podcast episode because she knows her story far better than I do. But it's really interesting with this understanding of trauma and how our bodies right now are reacting very similarly to trauma. So I want to go back to Rich's comment. So do you think we are getting used to the COVID-19 shock, kind of like what exposure therapy does? I'm not a therapist, so I want to say that. I'm talking about trauma a lot here, and I am a certified life coach or a trained life coach, but I am not a therapist. So these are purely my thoughts based on my experience. So I would be happy to redirect you to a therapist if you want to dive into these questions in more detail. But in regards to exposure therapy, I think it's, again, just from my personal experience, I feel like I am starting to learn what my body needs so that I can respond from a place of integrity. And I think a lot of us are starting to learn. Humans are so resilient. And that was the other piece when I was thinking about endurance. The concept of resiliency really came up for me, where as humans, we are resilient. Our bodies are designed to regulate in difficult situations. So I think in a lot of cases right now, our bodies are starting to regulate, similar to exposure therapy. But I think that that's where it is still important, especially for people who have previously experienced a lot of trauma. I think that some of these trauma responses are more strong. I'm not saying that grammatically correct, but I think in general, it is very important just to kind of notice our experience so we can honor our unique experience. I don't want to say that, I think everyone's experience is different. So I don't want to say anything specific for everyone because that I feel like would be incorrect. I hope that answers your question, Rich. And you and I can talk about this more in detail later as well, because that's an interesting question. So I want to kind of dive back into what I have here a little bit. So with endurance as a grace, when we think of it this way, and I think this kind of pulls in your comment, Jessica, with how to really connect grace to this, is I think grace allows us to flip things on their head. So instead of fight or flight, instead of this constant movement forward or just kind of like freezing, we can flip things and use our personal power and our sovereign leadership to consciously navigate our responses. And I think that that's where, as humans, we have the opportunity, and Sarah actually talked about personal power in her Tea Talk yesterday. But when we pick our personal power is already ours. It's up to us to decide what we want to do with it. And when we stand up in our personal power, when we utilize it, it gives us the opportunity to consciously navigate our responses. We can notice if it's a trauma response. We can notice how we're feeling and honor that. We can notice if we're actually doing really, really well, and potentially that's an opportunity then to serve other people who are really struggling. But we have to kind of flip things and allow ourselves to know where we're at, and kind of act from that place. So having grace for our human experience, looking at kind of the bigger picture, and then acting. So I'm kind of just starting to like regurgitate some of what I'm already saying, but this is one season of our human experience. And we do need to care for ourselves, allow our emotions, then we get to step into action from a place of grace and compassion and groundedness. And that is what the endurance piece is. Endurance is grace. It's breathing into this moment so we can endure through the immediate pain and step into the future. It's trusting our innate human resilience so we can endure through the immediate pain and step into the future. It's honoring our trauma response, speaking love over it, shifting back into a place of rest and digest so we can endure through the immediate pain and step into the future. So as humans, it just provides this way to survive together. when we step into our power and we step into like conscious action, serving ourselves first, taking care of ourselves, then it allows us to serve the collective, healing ourselves and acting from a place of integrity, stepping up in our leadership and creating sustainable solutions to support our fellow human beings and ourselves. I think that that's a huge piece of it is right now is with this endurance as grace. Again, it allows grace for the whole human experience, wherever we're coming at this from, noticing how we can create sustainable solutions for ourselves and for others. So being okay with being in the moment of the stress or fears before trying to move past it. Yeah, definitely. I did 2 weeks ago. I talked about just kind of noticing where we're at, just allowing and noticing, and then being able to step into action. Because I do think that's where the grace piece is especially important. It's like in yin yoga or in running. I'm not a runner, so I feel like I can't speak to that specifically, but it's when you reach that point of pain and you're like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't like it hurts. And you breathe into it and you allow it. And then you realize you can actually go further. And I feel like that's the same with running and with yoga. So it's really allowing it, not pushing yourself where you can't go. So, and I think that's important too. If there's a story that's coming up or a traumatic experience that you're not able to handle or carry right now, that's okay. And holding grace for that. We don't have to trudge up everything right in this season. It's noticing, what can I do right now? How can I best honor myself so that I can then act from a place of integrity? And I'm glad that's resonating with you, Jessica. I'm not sure which part of it resonated, so but I really appreciate your comments. This is good stuff. Good stuff. So I have a couple prompts here just to kind of support you as you're thinking through what endurance as a grace means for you and how you can apply it to your life. Again, this little talk is very short. So hopefully some of this was supportive for you. And then I just have these little prompts to just kind of like help you take things further and determine what feels good for you as far as application. So how can you create space in your life to trust your innate human resilience? How can you create space in your life to trust your innate human resilience? What does living with endurance and grace look like for you right now? What does living with endurance and grace look like for you right now? It's kind of that both and. How can you hold grace for whatever your experience is right now and then endure through the pain, hold space for it? So this is both and. You have to hold space for it and then endure it and step into integrity and action. I feel like there's just so much to unpack in that, but I think it's so important to hold it for yourself and determine what feels right for you. I can't tell you what's right for you. So what does living with endurance and grace look like for you right now? What shifts need to happen so you can take care of you right now? How can you sustainably support those around you right now? And that's a big piece. I know for me, an immediate reaction when a lot of this was coming up is a desire to support people around me because I'm in a helping field as a life coach. Wanted to give away all the free things. And I had to pull back and notice, what can I sustainably do to support those around me so that I can still hold space for me, because if you're constantly pouring out, you're going to run out, you're going to burn out. And that's what this feels like to me, this endurance as a grace. So how can we sustainably create solutions to hold space for our experience and for others? How can we listen to what others are experiencing and hold space for that and help them create solutions that serve their problems, which may be unique to different from ours, but also hold space for our experience? I keep thinking of breath work in that space. I need more of that in response to my body's voice. Breath work space. Yeah. Just like, I feel like I've been doing so much more meditation and breathing. This morning I did a meditation on my porch. It was a little cold. It's pretty cold today. But I noticed that when the meditation asked me to go back to normal breathing, I kept breathing really deeply. I realized this like 3 minutes into the meditation. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. My body is really needing to breathe deeply right now. And I think that's part of this whole process. What does your body need right now? And we may not notice it until we actually practice some of the tools that we have access to, which I thought was interesting. I didn't realize that I needed to breathe deeply. And then it was like, oh, all right, I needed that. So I'm going to move into a little bit of Q&A. I received some questions that I wanted to dive into. So feel free to drop any other questions in here. Jessica, I really appreciate all of your beautiful comments today. I love it. So I also wanted to highlight in the live description for today, or like in the title, I have some resources and my sources from some of what I chatted through today, including the post that I quoted, some free nervous system resources from someone that I follow. She's incredible, Irene Lyon. I heard about her through my life coach, and I just find her, she has so many free resources where she just talks about the nervous system, trauma responses, the vagus nerve, all of these things that I have no right to be talking about. And she is just incredibly skilled. So a podcast episode about trauma responses during this time. So it's actually a link to one of my podcast episodes that's brand new today. And then I also, like I mentioned earlier, I have a podcast episode with Jessica, who's commenting on here. And that's a beautiful one where we also dive into kind of some different trauma responses as well. Heart clearing and body strengthening workouts is another resource that I added. And that's a link to the class. Currently, they previously were only an in-person studio, but since COVID-19 has started, they have like a 2-week free thing. And I learned about this in a group that I'm on Facebook, and it's not just your traditional workout. It's very much like the deep work of like breathing and kind of moving and like clearing your system. So they're pretty expensive, but they have a 2-week trial right now. And then my free self-trust assessment and daily check-in guide, I've kind of been posting that pretty regularly. So, all right, let's move into a couple Q&A questions, and then I'll wrap up for now. So, okay, is it okay to not do anything for a whole day or a couple of days if I'm just feeling drained? So I feel this and I resonate with this question because I have felt this during this time in different seasons. So in answering this question, so it's definitely a personal preference and based on what is required of you at this time. I personally have a bit of flexibility in my life as I run my own business and have a partner who, we co-support each other. So I have flexibility to take some time off as I need it. So the other day I noticed that I needed some time and I just spent time painting. I was really up in my head with all the news and people telling me what to do and how to do it. So I noticed I needed to paint. So I did that. And then the rest of that afternoon, I was able to jump back into my work. So I think that that's a personal preference kind of thing where you have to figure out, will your job allow you space to do that? Is that something where maybe you even need to take a day off? Is that possible? And then what do you need? I feel like I always keep coming back to that question is what do I need? And the next question, I actually come back to that too. So the next question is, how can I mirror endurance for my kids during this time? So this is actually a really beautiful question. I saw another comment I need to answer. So how can I mirror endurance for my kids? One of my one-on-one clients, we were actually talking through this the other day, and I think I'm not a parent, so please take this with a grain of salt. But I think that this is the same response that I would have to anyone who is trying to show up with integrity in any capacity. So Endurance is really sustainability, which I think I think the root cause just comes back to self-trust and caring for yourself so that way you can pour out. So endurance is sustainability, which means pouring into yourself, which means then you can actually pour into other people. So I would start with those kind of core questions of how am I feeling and what do I need? And asking yourself those questions and then mirroring that to your family. For my one-on-one coaching client, that's a question where she's actually trying to support her kids in asking those questions. And oftentimes, especially if they're really young, they may need support with options. So like, what do I need? Do I need a snack? Do I need to go outside? Do I need to, yell and scream? Giving some options and guidelines, because kids, if you just ask, what do I need? As adults, we struggle with answering that question. So especially for kids, it's good to provide kind of some honed in options. But that would be kind of my immediate response to that. And again, take it with a grain of salt because I'm not a parent. That's just pulled from what I've chatted with other people in and how I try to show up for myself and mirror to my community and my family. So Rich says, I think making your space while serving others comes from knowing yourself and your limits. Yes, definitely. And then knowing that you need to have time for yourself to have energy needed to empower others. Yeah. Filling your cup so that you can support other people. Yeah. Gosh, you guys are just, I love all of the good questions and comments and everything. I love it. Okay, I need to wrap up here soon. I'll answer one more question. So, do you have any recommendations? This one's a quick one. Do you have any recommendations for things to do besides Netflix that I can do to rest in this crazy time? Podcasts, books, etc. So I put those in the description. Those are kind of my top first ones to jump into. Some other people that I speak about my coach all the time, Madison Morgan, MadisonMorgan.com. She has all kinds of beautiful resources. Podcasts. I put one episode of mine on there. I actually don't listen to too many podcasts. I try and follow people, and then I listen to the podcasts that those people are on. So I'm trying to think if there's any that are really standing up for me right now. And it's nothing's really coming to mind. I think I put kind of my favorites right now in that description. Okay, I'll do one more and then we'll wrap up. So what do I do if I sense myself going into overdrive, working too much and neglecting other responsibilities? So I think this, again, it comes back to those questions. What am I feeling and what do I need? Really taking a moment for a couple deep breaths, coming back to yourself. If you're feeling in overdrive, the best thing you can do is to try and come back to yourself and come back into rest and digest. And I would recommend, specifically if you are feeling like you're in that kind of fight or flight or just like go, to dive into some of Irene Lyon's resources. She has so many beautiful resources, free resources. She also has like a 21-day like reset of some kind, and that's a paid resource. I think it's like $200. But she has like lots of free ebooks. She's got a free trauma 3-part video series. And if you're really struggling with that fight or flight, or if you really notice that you just seem to be freezing, she has some really beautiful resources for that. And then you just keep coming back to yourself, breathing, asking yourself, how do I feel and what do I need? So, all right, I am going to let that be enough for today. And I really appreciate you guys joining me, and for everyone watching the replay, thank you so much. And never hesitate to reach out if you desire deeper support or just want to chat about these things in more detail. So, all right. Thank you. Love you all. Have a beautiful rest of the day. I have to find my mouse here. All right. See ya.